Please. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. Seeing no one, first pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Karen, roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Brazier? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Crowley?
Here.
Mr. Gorgone? Mayor Mullick? Councilmember Yeager?
Here.
Mrs. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Lundholm?
Here.
Mr. Malloy? Mr. Paducis?
Here.
Thank you.
And the mayor's walking.
Oh, there he is.
We have no resolutions to approve tonight. We do have the minutes of November 13, 2023. Anybody make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the previous meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Wait,
Aye.
well, I usually call them, okay.
Roll call.
Mr. Paducis motions, Mrs. Reed second. Councilmember Yeager?
Abstain.
Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Crowley?
Yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Abstain.
Mr. Paducis?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have one application this evening, Bogle Investment Properties LLC, 502 Washington Street, Block 1050, Lot 9, site plan preliminary and final.
Ready? All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Anthony Monzo. I'm an attorney representing the applicant in this case, which is Bogle Investment Properties LLC. It's actually brought on behalf of Michael Slowak, who's the owner of the Ugly Mug and who is the operator of a business in the property located at 502 Washington Street on the Cape May Mall. Mr. Slowak is to my left. To my right is Paul Farnan, who will provide some expert testimony with respect to the plans that were submitted. I also have with me Karen Thompson sitting here behind me, who's the owner of Sunflowers Boutique, which is a clothing store in the same building, and Joe Bogle is here as well, who's the owner of the property as one of the principals of Bogle Investment Properties LLC. I do not anticipate testimony from Mr. Bogle or Ms. Thompson. So if you want to swear in the witnesses, we can then proceed.
I'm going to also swear in our board engineer. Do each of you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, this is a continuation of a hearing that started, I believe it was in September, and it was continued based on some concerns and a request that we clarify exactly what the relief and what the business operation was for this kitchen at the subject property. There was a little bit of confusion, and I take part in that because things have changed over the course of the time when this started. It was during the COVID pandemic when this restaurant or this the Ugly Mug restaurant needed support from the kitchen at the subject property because of the dining that was occurring along Decatur Street. And it wasn't just the sidewalk dining, it was the dining that was occurring in the middle of the street, which was closed off during the pandemic. But since then, things have changed, the business plan has changed, and we clarified that in a letter that was submitted along with a business plan that was prepared by Mr. Slowak. So what I want to do, since it was quite some time since we started, I want to just kind of go through what we presented at the last hearing and supplement that hearing with additional testimony. Just to give some background, this property is located at the corner of the Washington Street Mall and Decatur Street. It was formerly a bank building purchased by Bogle Investment Properties and then converted to a retail store. It was Atlantic Bookstore for a number of years. And subsequently, when the bookstore closed, it was converted to a restaurant known as Stewart's. That was a change of use from retail to restaurant, required site plan review and approval. That was done, the board approved the restaurant use with 92 seats, which required 38 parking spaces. And as you know, this site has no on-site parking, so any increase in parking demand as a result of a change of use also requires a variance for parking. So what was previously a demand for 15 spaces was increased to 38 spaces, and as a result, this board approved that with the parking variance, and it operated as Stewart's for a few years until that business closed, and it was then converted back to a retail establishment that is currently being run as Sunflowers Boutique. There was no change of use at that time, so what we're trying to do is clean everything up to deal with the change of use from restaurant back to retail. But also, in that same building, there was a kitchen that was a fully functional kitchen that was previously used by Stewart's, and because of the need that Mr. Slowik had, a decision was made to keep that kitchen, do some renovations to it, and use it to supplement the overflow need, initially based on the pandemic and the dining along Decatur Street. Mr. Slowik went through the process. He went through discussions with the zoning official and with the construction office, put up partition walls to separate the kitchen from the retail space, converted, added another meter to separately meter the kitchen area, and also went through some electrical changes and fully equipped the kitchen for the current use that it's under. And Mr. Slowik will provide testimony, but I believe that cost was somewhere around $125,000 to do those renovations. So for the first year, at least, it was served its purpose of meeting the needs for the patrons along Decatur Street. And as that went away, as the pandemic subsided, it became more of a takeout type kitchen, but also serving. There were 6 tables that are patio tables that are there in the summer months along Decatur, and it was an optimal situation to use that kitchen to serve those 6 tables as well, to relieve the demands in the Ugly Mug kitchen. We've heard terms like a satellite kitchen. I mean, it's really not a satellite kitchen for the Ugly Mug. The principal use of this is a takeout kitchen for takeout food for people to pick up or to deliver, and whether it's being delivered to another restaurant or to patrons in another restaurant or to patrons at home, or if patrons come and pick it up, it's still, there's no seating in this kitchen, so it doesn't fit into the definition of an eating establishment under the C1 zoning standards, which requires on-site consumption of food. So it does not have that, and I do believe, and Mr. Slowik will probably elaborate on this as well, that was something that was looked upon favorably by the fire official, or fire subcode official, when the inspections were ongoing. So none of this was a problem until about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, when the zoning official changed and began questioning how this use can continue without going to the planning board for a change of use. And also based on the fact that it was changed from a restaurant back to retail, and there was never a change of use application submitted. So we were told and requested to submit an application for change of use to come back to the planning board to get it approved. And it was at that time when questions started to arise as to whether you have 1 use or 2 uses, whether it's all retail or whether it's retail and restaurant use. And if it's retail and restaurant, it's 2 uses, 2 principal uses, and therefore not permitted under zoning and would require a use variance before the zoning board. So that's where we kind of got stuck with this last time. Initially, my thought was that it was strictly takeout, and I wasn't aware until the hearing that there was still some service to the patrons at those 6 tables along Decatur Street. So we were requested to come back, maybe, and I think Mr. King suggested we put together a business plan and an operations plan, which we did, and to come back and clarify what exactly it was that was being done, and therefore the board can make an informed decision on this application, which requires first that you interpret the ordinance to determine whether it's one use or two uses, and then secondly, whether the site plan is approved based on the change of use. So with that background, I would like to have Mr. Slowak just explain for the board and answer any questions that the board may have what the operations are. I also note that the police did review this and had no concerns with it. I know there was a concern that people crossing Decatur Street could create safety issues, public safety issues. But on the other hand, all the hotels along Beach Avenue have concessions on the beach, and they cross Beach Avenue with food on plates covered, and they go across 2 lanes of traffic, parking, promenade, and then onto the beach. So that's something that really isn't a concern, and the city council approved that by changing the conditions on beach concessions with respect to hotel operations. So in this case, it's a single lane of traffic, speed limit's 5 miles per hour, there's 2 crosswalks and 2 stop signs. So that, I believe, should not be a concern, and the police didn't see it as a concern. So with that background, I'm going to have Mr. Slowak explain the business plan and basically the layout of the kitchen, if you can just elaborate on that.
Tony, we don't have a business, we don't have a copy of what he's going to say, right? He hasn't submitted a business plan in writing?
We submitted it, yes.
What's it dated, the 29th?
It's attached to the 29th memo.
Okay. Got it, okay. I thought it was something new since the
Okay.
last time.
It's been that long ago, I understand, so. And I apologize for the delay in getting back here, so.
So the kitchen is used, it's fully equipped with point-of-sale computers, printers. You can walk right up to it, and you can order food. We also use it to serve 6 tables on the side of the Ugly Mug during our busy season. During the time that somebody would come in the Mug and order takeout, those people can, those computers are relayed across the street, and the food is made, a runner is brought across the street with the food and given to the people that are waiting in the Ugly Mug. So it allows us to continue takeout versus, because we're so busy in our summer months, just stopping takeout at 6:30 at night and turning it completely off, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because we can't handle the volume. So it allows us to continue takeout, and a lot of restaurants, since COVID, takeout has expanded from 2 or 3% of their sales to 10, 15%, and it doesn't take much to tip a kitchen over, to have 15, 20-minute wait times to an hour wait times. Doesn't take a whole lot of tickets, and if you have a lot of people that want takeout, it just buries the kitchen. So this gives us the ability to continue our operations the way we have been doing them for the last 3 years at this 502 Washington Street.
And there are no tables and no on-site consumption of food?
None whatsoever. It just produces the food, and it either goes to our 6 tables, or it goes inside as takeout, or the people wait outside Stewart's and pick the food up right there with, and they can pay right at Stewart's. You walk right at the door.
Can you elaborate on your marketing plan for how you're promoting this as a separate independent business?
We promote online a lot, and we're going to do more advertising in media and newspapers as we get final approvals and get the sign. We're going to put signs up over the door, and that'll drum up a lot more business also and guide them more to the 502 Washington. But the Ugly Mug's been there a long time. People like to walk in the door and see what's going on and wait for their takeout, and it affords them the ability to continue as they have in the past.
We submitted a plan that shows the layout on page 2 of the kitchen. And I'm just going to have Mr. Slowak explain that layout and how patrons that come in are served at the takeout kitchen. Focus on this drawing here. And this is on page 2. It's the lower left-hand corner of the attachment of the plan.
Yeah, so if you're looking at page 2, So it'll be the lower left of page 2. You'll see the word kitchen with number 102 in a box. To the left of that, you'll see the doors to the kitchen. Parallel to that, that would be Decatur Street. They open right up onto Decatur Street. So you would walk in those doors, basically there'd be somebody standing outside at all times, and there'd be a menu outside. They can order, they go inside, the server or hostess there will enter the order into the computer. It goes to these kitchens, printers, and they get their takeout order. Conversely, if they walk in the Ugly Mug, the same thing happens. We program those computers to send takeout orders over to this kitchen. And the same thing will happen.
What about the, just operationally, how, and focus mainly on two things. One is how does food get to takeout customers, and how does food get to patrons that are dining along Decatur Street?
Right,
From
so-
an operational standpoint.
Right, so we would have 2 or 3 cooks, a salad person, and a dishwasher make the food in the kitchen. They either plate it up, and the health department told us to cover it. So if it's going to the 6 tables, we just walk it right across the street. If it's going to a takeout, we put it in takeout containers, bag it up, condiments, hand it to the people there. Or if somebody's waiting inside the Mug, it's bagged up, condiments, we carry it over and hand it to the person that's controlling takeouts in the Ugly Mug's kitchen bar area.
And what other examples, I kind of alluded to it, but I want to hear you, from your observations, do you see in Cape May where there's food delivered across streets and so
Well,
forth?
besides the delivery services, you have DoorDash and Uber Eats that do it all over town. They stop in the middle of the street, block traffic, and drop their food off wherever they're going. Vice versa, they pick it up, and the city doesn't seem to have a problem with that, or aren't aware of it. And so along Beach Drive, I have people that work for me now that are managers that were previous runners for some of these hotels for years. And they take the food, plated, covered, and walk it 300-400 feet to people sitting at tables on the beach in designated areas or just certain areas on the beach. So they're walking 300-400 feet across 2 lanes of traffic, 25 miles an hour, dodging cars and parked cars, and climbing up on the promenade with probably 5 times, 10 times the volume that we're doing for those side tables. So it's a lot of volume going across Beach Drive, and it's been, many, many years that's taken care, has happened. We're not trying to do anything different that many large establishments on Beach Drive are doing right now.
How many employees do you anticipate in the kitchen?
No more than 5. That's it. That's a peak time.
What about trash disposal? What's your?
It has its own enclosed trash area out back, so there'd be no trash visible at all. It's a large room.
And pickup is house trash? pickup?
Everyday waste management,
Okay.
recycle and trash.
And what about signage?
We're planning on putting the signage up. We have to go through HPC to get it approved.
And that's the signage that's also shown on
The picture.
on the second page of the exhibit. And for the record, the sign will be done in a way that complies with the sign ordinance. To the extent it does not, we understand that it would require relief from either the planning or zoning board. So the intent is for that sign to meet all of the zoning requirements for signage. Can you explain on the process that you went through to get this kitchen set up, and who you met with, and what approvals and permits and things like that?
Right, so I met with Greg Neal, Lou Vito, and Skip, and I believe there was an electrical inspector various times on site, and they had some discussion over whether they were going to allow me to continue to do some of this work or even start the work. And then they all came to an agreement that it's so many similar operations are all over town, they don't think we could stop them. They could stop us from doing this. So.
I'm going to instruct the board, though, this is my standing policy, is that we're not going to get any credit for it being there. We're not going to punish you for it being there either. It's a neutral position. We don't do a stop. So you can tell your story, but
Okay.
the board, it shouldn't affect anything we decide.
But I think the testimony is before he did any work. He's talking about what transpired. He didn't, it wasn't an after-the-fact meeting. You wanted to elaborate?
It's a stopper argument, and it's just, whether that was a good decision or a bad decision on their part, we're not gonna give you credit for or punish you for it. You're just coming in and asking for an approval. So
Yes.
I don't mind you telling the story, but it just, we don't do a stopper. So,
Okay.
you know, maybe they were totally off base and let you do that, or maybe they misled you.
Gotcha.
That's what we decide, okay? But I just don't want you to, but you can tell the story, and not.
Okay. So they went in different, they walked around and told me where to build a wall to separate the two businesses, and told me where they would want the electrical meter put in. And it took a little while for them to send the cut card to Atlantic City Electric, a few weeks till they got together and decided, okay, we're going to allow them to continue with the separation of these two businesses and continue with the construction, was basically what occurred.
Just to, and I agree with Mr. King, by the way, on
Mr. Chairman, could I just interrupt for just a second? I'm losing track of some things here that, a couple issues I want to clarify before we go too much further. On the documents that you sent to us, you said there were going to be 3 employees in the kitchen, in the retail kitchen, but you just said there was going to be 5 employees in the retail.
It depends on how busy it is. Most of the time, there's always 3, but if it gets super busy, there might be 4, and I'm just using 5 as a max, as one of the guys that run across the street as.
That would be consistent with our ordinance on parking requirements, which will be a parking space for each employee on the largest shift, correct?
Yeah.
And then also, you said there are going to be signs?
Yes.
But in this memo we got, it said there's not going to be any signs.
We don't have signs right now, but if the planning board.
Applicant does not propose erecting any exterior signage on the retail kitchen.
We don't have any signs, but if we're required to or we're allowed to, we would put a sign above the window, but it's an optional thing.
we didn't,
Site plan review or no?
What's that?
Don't you need to know if there's a sign or not for part of the site plan review?
Yeah, we did not review any sign standards with regards to this application, so. I know it's on the new plans, but I did not see it, and so
yeah,
there.
we don't have any proposed signage. It was just as for an illustration as to what might happen, and if it requires approval. I mean, if we meet the sign ordinance, and it's,
You're arguing that you're gonna provide conforming signage. In the event you're not, you're gonna have to come back to the board and get.
yes.
variance approved. So. They're permitted to have signs, there's
Right.
standards, they're gonna
I'm just,
comply with
I
them.
only bring it up because in one document it said they're not going to have a sign.
No, I saw that too, and I initially, and then I just, as I was flipping through the newer set, I just saw the sign.
Mr. Farnan is, I'm sorry,
How
Rich.
does signage work with 2 principal uses, or, even if not 2 principal uses, but isn't there signs on the front of this building already?
Says you're allowed to have 1 freestanding sign for each tenant.
Tenant.
Tenant. Each business or commercial establishment may erect signs that advertise its business under 1 or more of the following provisions. And then it goes on to say, it gives you freestanding signage controls as well as building-mounted controls. So such area of such sign does not exceed 20 square feet plus 1 additional square foot for each 4 feet of setback.
I think that when there's, okay. I
So-
guess we got to my same confusion about how many units you can have in a single building, how many
Yeah.
uses you can have in a building, so.
And Mr. Farnan will address the signage just briefly if he,
My notes are saying he's going to provide conforming signage.
Right.
So we can just
Yeah.
pass
Okay.
that and then-
all right. I just wanted to point out, and I agree with Mr. King on doing work without approvals and relying on permits and so forth, but my understanding is that when you get before you get any permits from the construction office, it has to go through zoning. And the zoning officer has to sign off on it, which happened in this case. Now, we don't have,
But the problem with that, Mr. Monzo, is this. We can go down that road, all right? And then I can say, well, let me see what you applied for. Did you explain your business plan? Did you say you were going to run food across the street to the other place? And then we get into a sub-hearing on an issue that should have no bearing on the decision. So I try to let people say something about it if they want to, but really, I would have to challenge them on it. I'd say, okay, well, you say you have a permit, let me see the permit. What did you apply for? And then it turns into an issue about whether the estoppel was appropriate or not. And then what are we doing? We don't decide that. So my general policy is to avoid that entirely and say, we're not gonna cut your break because you did it. We're not gonna punish you for doing it. Otherwise, we have to have a hearing about it.
the purpose of
That's true.
the purpose of the testimony is to demonstrate that Mr. Slowik went to city officials, didn't just do this and then ask for forgiveness. It was something that was planned out, reviewed, and basically what happened there was actually at the direction and at the request of the construction official. And if he can elaborate on that, the construction of the wall, the separation, can you just address that?
Was this when the road was filled with seats?
No, before.
No, before.
No, what I mean is during COVID, that whole area was blocked off and there was seating everywhere that you could look. Was it during?
At one point, there was
Yes, I
seating
mean,
in the
it's
street.
hard to, that's what I'm saying, I need to, if we're gonna say that the city let him do this and he should be allowed to continue for that reason, then we need to really understand what the circumstances were at the time, because at the time, there was about 400 seats between the two buildings. So if someone wanted to put a kitchen there,
I
they
understand.
wanted to do whatever they wanted to do at that time anyway. So now, I don't want him to get punished for it, but I also don't want to give him the benefit for it. So I'd rather you just focus on the thing he's requesting.
I mean, is there anything else that you needed to address
No.
in connection with your approvals? I'm going to have unless the board has questions, and then I'll go to Mr. Funk.
Can I add one thing to what Rich just said, too? Because my concern is that there's been so many changes to what's going on here that we had to cancel this discussion until a later date. One of the things that popped up when I was reviewing the papers is that the police department signed off on this, but that was in March. And what we're hearing today, I'm not at all sure that the police department reviewed in March what we're talking about today in terms of the traffic and the crossing over of the street with the food. And the other thing that came up in the business plan was the Grubhub and the food distribution services that are now operating all over the place. They're all in cars. And are we looking at a situation where cars are going to be using Decatur Street as a short-term parking lot to pick up their food? And in which case, what does that do to the traffic flow on Decatur Street? And even people just coming over from their house to pick up food, where they're going to want to park in front of those double doors there. In my mind, the police department's review of this issue is stale and doesn't consider what we have on the table in front of us now. I'd like to request, Mr. Chairman, that we ask the police department to review this issue one more time and see whether or not it's still consistent with their original assessment that this was not a problem.
The original application did actually request approval to have the food crossing Decatur Street.
Right.
That
But
was-
not the
that's what-
Grubhub and not the food delivery and the cars that are going to be occasioned by running what amounts to a drive-up takeout window pickup in the middle of the Washington Mall area. To me, it's a concern.
My only comment is anywhere you go and get takeout food in Cape May, you're going to have to drive up and pick the food up. Whether you're driving up to Decatur Street at the entrance to the Ugly Mug, or the Delaney's down the road, or any of the restaurants in town, somebody's going to have to park a car somewhere to pick up food. And
I
Cape
get
May,
that.
what are you going to do? I mean,
I get that.
you
but
find parking and you just get, you do
You're not suggesting that the planning board just throw their hands up in the air and say that's the way it is? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I'm just saying it's a problem all over town. I'm not dismissing that. But I think with takeout food, it's a little bit easier because, many times you're not really looking to park a car. You may have two people in the car, somebody just gets dropped off, they pick up the food, and then you pick them up when the
Not
food's
with the
ready.
food delivery services that I've seen.
No, we're not food delivery services. We just produce the food, and I've been in town for almost 40 years, takeout at 3 separate restaurants, and there's not cars lined up. It's people walking. 99% of the people coming into our places for takeout are walkers.
So then you're guaranteeing there won't be a problem.
What's that?
Let's answer your question. As I understand it, the application that was submitted on August 31st, 2023, which was the original one, that presumably is the one the police signed off on, had this exact plan that they're doing now in it.
With the food delivery services and the,
It says order takeout directly from the retail kitchen, and then it said the retail kitchen will also alleviate some of the overflow from the Ugly Mug kitchen, which will reduce wait times and improve customer service. In this regard, servers working on the outside patio will be able to direct food orders to the POS of the retail kitchen. Once the food is prepared, the retail kitchen staff member will take the food and deliver it to the server utilizing the appropriate crosswalks at all times. Additionally, many of the call-in takeout orders for the Ugly Mug will be routed to the retail kitchen where the food will be prepared and picked up. So
I'm reading from their business plan, though.
I understand, but your question was, have the police signed off on this crossing? And it would seem that they have, I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not saying it's a good idea or bad idea, whether I would have signed off, I'm not saying that. I'm just.
If you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. I'm just talking about, at this point.
The original business plan was September 29th.
Yeah, right, but that was way before,
Well, that was what but this hasn't changed since,
no, no.
I could be wrong with this. I think this plan that's attached to this packet, this application, this one here, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I see underlined notes that I did last time. So this was with us last time. Okay, at a hearing in sometime in early September.
Correct.
And this September 29th one was done in reaction to our meeting.
Correct.
Then we adjourned October, and now we're hearing in November.
Right.
So,
And the police sign-off was dated March 27th.
It couldn't have been signed off before the application was submitted.
yeah, the application is stamped received August 31st, 2023.
I'm just saying, this is it right here. It says, received by the city of Cape May, March 27th, 2023.
The exact one that I gave to the police, if you want to look at it, if I marked one.
Yeah, it's got the same. You gotta love Gary. This has the, yes, PD submitted, and it has that thing that I just read to you.
It's got the Grubhub stuff in there?
I think, Rich, let me just clarify. What you're looking at is, I believe, a resubmission after Craig's comments.
Yeah.
The application was submitted earlier in the year,
Right.
and that's what the police reviewed. We just addressed, I believe, Craig's comments and resubmitted. I mean, it's been a while ago, but the police would not have commented on something that wasn't submitted as an application for an approval.
Yeah, that's this document here. This thing here.
Yeah, I understand that, I'm just trying to show you what the police handle.
The original review memo from Craig was March 8th, 2023. So we submitted prior to March 8th, 2023.
I would assume so.
So the police saw a plan with things crossing the road, and that's,
Okay.
or whatever that's.
Mr. Chairman, I have a request. So, I'm just adding on to Mr. Crowley, and this is just a statement, and this is for the safety of pedestrians. So just to reiterate a little bit here, if I'm at the Ugly Mug and place a takeout order, your point-of-sale system will send it across the street.
Correct.
Those patrons will stay at the Ugly Mug, and you'll have a runner go over to them with the takeout order.
That's correct.
Okay. If I come through these two doors and order, where the sign is, basically, where the proposed sign is, and I can place my order there, and I wait for my order there.
Correct.
Okay. My only concern is that's on Decatur Street, and that's a very congested area during the summer with pedestrians. So now you're going to have people walking up and down Decatur Street and then people waiting for their order. So some people might have to go out on the street just to let some people go by that are waiting for their order. It's just a statement I'm making of safety and concern.
Comment?
Okay, so the majority of the people doing the takeout come in the Ugly Mug proper to do their orders. The 502 Washington is not going to get all the volume. It's going to be able to take takeout, but people like to walk in the Ugly Mug and get their takeout. It's just a habit of people. They walk through the hostess and the patio, and they come inside and they hang out and they order their food, and the food gets relayed over here and walked across the street. At the door, outside this kitchen door of 502 Washington, is a giant yellow sign. It's about 4 feet by 4 feet with a man blinking saying, "Cross here." So it's telling people to cross, and then you have the pedestrian walkway where at least 1,000 people an hour cross there with little kids and all. So our one person every 15 minutes that's an adult looking out is not at risk compared to a 5-year-old with an ice cream cone not paying attention in a crowd of people. So there's a lot of people that cross Decatur.
Is the way you operated this summer pretty much what you're presenting here?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly what we're looking to do.
And maybe Mr. Farnan can address some of those issues that were raised by Mr. Paducas, because I believe this is fairly close to the intersection of Carpenter's Lane and Decatur, which has a large area, and there are no dining tables along this side of Decatur Street, so it has a fairly decent sidewalk that can accommodate a larger number of people. But if you want to address that, Paul?
Certainly. So on that particular subject, my personal perspective on this is the number of people that might be crossing the street in activities related to this to-go order is inconsequential compared to the thousands of people that use the Washington Street Mall throughout the year. As Mr. Monzo just alluded to, there is a bump out at the rear part of that building where there's a couple of trash cans, perhaps there's not a bench, maybe there's a bike rack nearby, but it allows for space for occupants of that sidewalk, pedestrians, or people picking up food at this to-go place to congregate and not be spilling into the street. I was born and raised here, so anecdotally I could tell you that people are crossing Decatur and Jackson without much regard throughout the peak season in the summer. So I think there's a lot of focus on this aspect as well there should be. It is a life safety aspect. But I think what we really should be focused on is the planning board's approval of this use and how this use can exist in this building. Obviously, what we haven't talked about yet, which was a big talking point the last time we were here, is what is the use of this building? And in my opinion, and I believe the applicants and the councils, is that it is the retail sale of goods and prepared foods. It's not a restaurant. Not a portion of it is a restaurant. There's not seating. There's no proposed seating. There's no means for people to consume this food on the premises. So that, I think, is the first place that we should kind of gear towards, refocus to. Another aspect of it is the two uses. Obviously, there's retail clothing in the front. Again, it is our position that is retail sale of food, prepared food, in the back. But it's the same in the zoning ordinance. It's the same definition. They're included under the same definition. So I would just like to start there. As far as the space inside. What we've amended from the last time we were here is a to-go counter right as soon as you enter those double doors. So that would be the furthest extent somebody could step through. Everyone else in the kitchen would have to walk around this peninsula type of counter to exit the building. This, in many ways, is exactly like Hot Dog Tommy's in town, on the corner of Jackson and Beach. It is the rear unit of a actually probably truly a multi, I don't know this for certain, but I know there's probably a third use on the second floor of that building, but the front facing Beach Ave is mercantile retail sale of goods. This is in the rear retail sale of prepared foods.
No seating.
No seating, correct.
Mr. Farney, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
And I'm not going to sneak up on anybody here. I've told Mr. Monzo, I'm going to have the board vote on whether they think this requires a use variance. Now, I'm not a decider,
Sure.
so that's going to be the vote. So I just want to ask you a couple questions, and I'm not trying to trick you or take a position, but I want the board to be able to think about it. So you opine that what we're talking about is 525-22, which are the permitted uses in the C1 primary business district.
Correct.
And subsection M says retail sale of goods or prepared food. And your position you're articulating is that there's really only one use on this property, and that use is the retail sale of goods and clothing in the front, and prepared food, which is the prepared food they're selling in the back. And therefore, this is really just one use, retail sale of goods or prepared food. Do you think that the fact that it says or means that you can either do the retail sale of goods or you can do the retail sale of prepared foods? But is it really one use to say that you're selling clothing in a front store and prepared foods in the back?
I would say that it's my opinion that it is one use. And I would argue that the occupant just opposite the mall is doing both those things in one space.
Yeah, but they haven't come before us, so.
Certainly.
I mean, it's hard to do that, you know, like, just like Tommy's Hot Dogs, like, that's not before us. and
Right.
It's cool, it's a hot mess over there when there's a long line and you
Right.
just walk by and there's a telephone pole.
Right.
And I'm not sure that really, you know, but it's awesome and it's there and it exists, so we live with it. But would we approve that right now if it came here? I don't know. But all we can do is the application before us, right? So I just want to make sure I understand your testimony, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Your testimony is that selling clothing and then having a kitchen in the back is the retail sale of goods or prepared food, a single use that's permitted.
I do believe it is a single use, and I would contend that if it were intended to be two, it would be identified as such in the zoning ordinance.
Right, so under section N where it says you can have a service business such as, but limited to, shoe repair, tailor, jewelry repair, travel agent, duplicating service, or small appliance repair. Someone could have a building and have a jewelry store and a travel agency, and that would be one use.
As I read the zoning ordinance, I think that's how it's written.
Okay. And that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're, you know, and if it were a restaurant, I mean, just like that. Does the fact that they're serving food, not just for takeout, but serving tables across the street, is your opinion that that is prepared food and not a restaurant?
I believe the use at 502 Washington is selling prepared food. And I think, and it's my opinion, that the transport of food from one site to another is occurring regardless, whether that be from this location or another restaurant. in town or elsewhere. That's just kind of the nature of the world that we live in right now.
Are the seats that are outside at the Ugly Mug, are they on the Ugly Mug property, or are they on the public sidewalk?
They're on Ugly Mug property. The side tables. I wanted to note,
Okay.
I also
My
wanted,
questions, and the board can think about it.
The tables on Decatur Street are on your property?
correct. And the sidewalk here at 502 is 12 feet wide. In front of Hot Dog Tommy's and the Mad Batter, it's like 6 feet wide. All around the rest of the mall is about 6 feet wide, maybe 7. This is 12 feet wide. The building is set back. For some reason, the sidewalk is the largest on the mall, so 12 feet wide is very wide there.
Yeah, I'm not being critical.
I'm saying for safety.
What I'm saying is I'm trying to understand what the difference is between a kitchen that services tables outside on another property and the Ugly Mug.
And-
I'm not quite seeing the, personally, I'm just struggling with that. If the board's gonna vote intellectually, it's just like it's a kitchen serving tables outside, and now the Ugly Mug is a kitchen serving tables outside, but you're not a prepared food, you're a restaurant. So the fact that the tables just don't happen to be on the Stewart's Root Beer side of the sidewalk as opposed to the Ugly Mug sidewalk, it converts this to a prepared food kitchen, and that's a question in my mind that the board has to resolve for themselves.
Rich, if I could,
That's all.
if I could amplify that too, because you're raising a concern that's sort of bothering me too. But let me be simplistic, because I'm a simple guy. I go to the Ugly Mug, and I sit at one of those tables on Decatur Street, and I order something from the takeout menu.
It's one menu, there's no takeout menu, it's all the same menu everywhere.
Well, so I sit at one of those tables and I order something off your menu, and it's delivered to me from the kitchen across the street by one of your folks. And then I sit at those tables and I eat that food. How is that not a part of the Ugly Mug restaurant operation and not a takeout service?
Is the food being out container?
Covered, we serve it in,
So then the takeout is doing more than just takeout.
But you're not taking it
course.
anywhere
Yeah.
except to the
Of course
Ugly
it
Mug
is.
where I'm going to eat it.
wherever you take it out to, people can take it out to different places. I mean, it's serving two functions. If it's a takeout, you're taking it home, or you're sitting on a bench on the mall eating it. and
Yeah, but you get my point, though. If I'm
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
at one of your tables on
Understand.
Decatur Street, and by the way, there's probably more than 6.
There's 6.
All right, okay.
Exactly 6.
But I'm sitting at one of those tables, and I order something off of your menu, and one of your folks brings it to me from across the street,
Correct.
and I sit at those tables and I eat it.
Right.
That's not takeout. I'm eating at the Ugly Mug.
It's exactly the same as if you're sitting on the beach and you order from Congress Hall.
I'll go back to Rich.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, something to interject. So if I sitting at your table in Decatur Street, and my food comes from across the street, and I'm eating that food, can I also order liquor?
From the mug, not from across the street. No liquor is across the street.
Well, then what is it, a restaurant or is it takeout?
Can I just interject because obviously that's the question, is to take out, you take it to a table. But just as a matter of fact, the amount of chairs aren't changing. So if you're sitting at a seat at the Mug and you're ordering something, I guess my question is, if they were asking for more seats because, now we have more capacity to deliver more food, that would be an issue to me because, now you're crowding that area and putting in more seats. But you're sitting in one seat no matter what. I guess my question is, what does it matter if it comes from that kitchen?
Well,
or
I think it
from that-
matters because in the case we're talking about here, the double doors across the street, in fact, become a satellite kitchen,
Sure.
which is something that we thought we were not going to be dealing with because this was not going to be a satellite kitchen.
Can I,
Does it make a difference that what you're talking about is true, that's the way they do it, but the fact that you can just go up there without going to the mug and get.
Well, that's
order
true.
out.
Yeah, and somebody
But
can,
now, does that change your thought about it all, about the use of this kitchen? It's not solely for
well,
Ugly Mug.
it does, it makes me troubled about the use of the kitchen, because I'm still not sure that it isn't a satellite kitchen, because even though the applicant says it's not a satellite kitchen, it looks to me.
Look, I can only tell you, if somebody's walking up the street and they don't know that these two guys are related, and they go up to the counter and buy something there, they don't know the Ugly Mugs across the street, that they're the same business. They don't.
Yeah, but I'm talking about people who sit on the chairs.
That's what I'm trying to say. Does it make a difference that maybe half the people know that it's for the Ugly Mug and half the people don't even care? They want to just take it out and leave.
Can I make a comment? Because, I mean, I agree, it's a confusing operation, but the mall itself is just a conglomeration of a lot of different businesses, doing a lot of different things. If people are sitting, and I'm not saying he would permit this, but he can, if somebody's sitting at the Ugly Mug along Decatur Street and they want to order pizza from the place across the mall, and they want to bring the pizza over to that table, does that make the pizza place a restaurant if there's no indoor dining? Or a hot dog from Hot Dog Tommy's, if they want to order a hot dog and they bring it up the street? It's this, you can't convert a takeout kitchen to a restaurant.
Doesn't make it the use.
Let me finish. You can't convert a takeout kitchen that has no indoor dining to a restaurant. It just doesn't meet the code requirements. And I understand Mr. Crowley's concern, then the optics are, wait a minute, they're bringing food, but that's not all they're doing. It's an incidental use to something that is equipped to do a lot more than just serve 6 tables along Decatur Street. It's equipped to serve a need that Cape May is lacking, and that's takeout food.
That's fine. I mean, I guess, I think, if it takeout food is okay, it's just, I think the breakdown is that a kitchen serving people who are sitting at a restaurant is part of a restaurant.
So
And and they're ordering drinks, I mean, I think that's the confusion for everybody, so,
But they're not ordering drinks from the takeout kitchen.
no, but the drink thing is just a confusing thing, and that you guys gotta deal with the ABC on that, I don't know how that works, but what I'm saying is, what happened at the last meeting, I thought, okay, was that, and I think you may misremember it a bit, you came in with a business plan that said exactly what you're saying now.
Right.
But your presentation was that it was just a takeout facility. And then you kind of and then your client kind of said, well, no, we're going to serve those tables across the street. And you were like, what? And I said, wait a minute, I thought it was going to just be a takeout thing. And remember, we talked about having a different name, was going to have the same name as that. And now it's back to where it was, which was when it took you a little bit by surprise, only because you did it 10 months before, which is now the waitresses are running back and forth, serving the tables at the Ugly Mug with the kitchen that's at the retail shop next door. And that's where I think it's just getting a little confusing. So my concerns on the ordinance, I mean, I have my own concerns about whether retail sale of goods or prepared food means you can have 2 different types of business in the same thing. I disagree with my friend there that you could have a travel agency and a shoe repair shop in the same building, just goes through in the same subparagraph. I'm not sure I buy that totally, but I think the breakdown is this just sounds like a restaurant. I mean, I think that's it, but I don't know. I mean, that's the reaction I'm hearing. Is anything, am I misremembering last time?
So, whenever I look at these, like from a use analysis standpoint, I go through the uses, through the entire district. Does it fit this? Does it fit that? Does it fit this? So the 2 closest things, the closest animals that we have, and we don't have specific definitions of these descriptions in the C1. So the definition is essentially what's in the C1 district. And so H is the eating establishments designed for on-premises consumption, including those having outdoor table facilities, provided that such facilities are portable and within 10 feet of the principal building. Drive-in facilities with window or curb service are not permitted. That's exactly what the Ugly Mug is. That's not what this site is. So, and the Ugly Mug is also a drinking establishment, which is...
And that's a, can I just ask a question?
Sure.
So, H is eating establishments.
Yep.
Says nothing about drinking.
Correct.
And we have G is
Which is a
drinking.
Right.
So you're combining G and H into one use,
Yeah.
right?
My,
But then we have M, which is another line item. I mean, you can make an argument that all of these commercial uses really are commercial uses related to a business district, and there's no distinction about having retail and food service in the same building.
I'm gonna go
Because
back.
if you have food service and drinking and a bar in the same building, you have two
The
uses.
purpose of that is that, G, you can have a drinking establishment that doesn't serve food. And then you can have a restaurant,
Yeah.
and that may or may not serve alcohol.
All right, let me finish, because I don't go into great detail with the two uses. Because I think the one important element that I can't get past in trying to fit this into a permitted use is the fact that they're using this kitchen as a support kitchen for the eating establishment across the street. And nowhere in here does it permit that. So retail sale of goods or prepared food is what they're saying it is. But the fact that this is supporting the kitchen across the street, nowhere is not permitted in here. So I can't find any permitted use where that use is allowed. So that's the part that I'm hung up on.
Every hotel on the beach that has beach service supports the beach service on the beach strand, which does not permit restaurants. So you have every hotel on the beach delivering food from the hotels in plates, crossing Beach Avenue, crossing the promenade, going onto the beach. What's the difference?
Can't they deliver pizzas to a park?
Right. But they're not,
They're not using two buildings.
Right.
They're delivering pizza to a park.
and they're allowed to have 20.
But the use is not permitted on the beach. Did any of the beach concessions come to the zoning board and get a variance?
Does someone have tables on the beach and I've missed it? Do they have tables serving people?
But they're serving food on the beach.
And they have tables?
There's certainly cabanas
Yeah.
that are on the beach that have chase lounges and chairs that
4 or
are
5
accompany them.
hotels.
Or tables, rather.
That's not permanent. Right.
All right, look.
And I would
thought
just-
I thought you were coming, well, I don't, the board's gonna vote on it, okay, if you want them to, on whether or not this requires a use variance, all right? And then the board's gonna, if they say no, then they can vote on it as a site plan, all right? If they say it needs a use variance, then I think you go to the zoning board. But I just want to, before they get there, I want to figure out how critical it is that you serve, that you, these 6 tables are served by this kitchen over there, as opposed to it just being takeout. Because I think that makes a big difference to in the ordinance and the board.
Can I make this even more complicated?
Well, I'm trying to find, you want to find a path to yes, right?
Well,
I mean,
It was, the New Jersey Revised Statute Code of Criminal Justice, strangely enough, defines food commodity in packaged form, prepared foods, which are not sold for retail sale and are not intended for consumption at the point of manufacture.
We have to rely on our zoning ordinance. I don't know how that's appropriate.
No?
Well,
I mean, if again, I'm taking this from just a layman's perspective, but if I sit down at a table, at one of those tables, and I order something off the Ugly Mug menu, I don't care what kitchen it's coming from, but it could come from one of 2 kitchens, one across the street
Mr.
and
Mazza,
one
can I
inside
just
the
lay it
building.
out for you? For this to work for you, right, my understanding is we have to accept that you can have the retail sale of goods and prepared food, and prepared food in the same building, and that doesn't need a use variance. That's your argument position, right? And I get that. That's fine. And I'm going to let them vote on that. What I'm trying to figure out is if you have a better chance of succeeding on that, if prepared food isn't this thing where they serve tables across the street like it's a restaurant. Because that's very hard for me to personally, and it sounds like that's getting a lot of resistance. So if the vote is if you can have a retail sale and a takeout establishment, that's more like prepared food, but as soon as you start serving tables across the street, I think that's,
Would it make a difference
I don't know, maybe I'm
if, and I'll ask Mr. Slowick, if the food was, instead of plated food, if it was just brought to the kitchen and expedited from the kitchen, would that make a difference? I mean, does that change it? I think the board's getting,
No, because that's my hangup. It's a support kitchen for the business across the street. So you're allowing a use to bleed into other sites. And that to me is, flies in the face of zoning.
when you look at the mall, and I know we don't know who got what approvals for the various businesses in the mall. If you put a coffee bar and a clothing shop, is that going to be a second use that's going to require a use variance? What about the Center City Mall that has 9 different?
Shopping centers.
But let me just finish. Center City Mall has 9 different businesses, including one that had food service with table service. You have the Center City, not the Center City, you have the Carpenter Square Mall that has food and retail, all in the same building. You have Dellis that has retail and you have a lunch counter. And you have bakeries. You have bakeries along with without tables, and you have coffee places without tables next to, as part of the same building, next to retail. It's all over the Washington Street Mall. I believe, and maybe a little bit of a stretch, but this ordinance, when you're looking at the C1 district, these uses are meant to coexist in all buildings. I mean, again, you have drinking establishment as a separate use, eating establishment as a second use. But if an eating establishment has a bar, we're going to consider it one use. Does that make sense? It does. This makes sense too, because all businesses exist in the business district. I look at the Washington Street Mall as a mall. No different than the Cherry Hill Mall or any other mall that has all these different businesses. It's a pedestrian mall. The only difference is it's outdoors. And I think the board needs to be a little flexible on its interpretation of the ordinance when it comes especially with businesses along the Washington Street Mall. It makes perfect sense. Think logically as opposed to trying to put a round peg in a square hole, which I think the board is trying to do in this case. It doesn't happen. You're never going to get there with that. I think it's a reasonable business plan. It's a reasonable method of operation. And I think the fact that food gets brought across the street is kind of like a red herring in this whole thing, because it doesn't matter if the food goes across the street or down the street or across town. It's still leaving the one kitchen and going somewhere else. So to me, it's the retail sale of food, and I think retail sale of food and retail sale of goods are really one use, as Mr. Farnan explained. So I'm sorry to get off on a tangent on that, but I do think that this is, we're trying to nitpick too much on what the ordinance says with respect to permitted uses on the mall.
Well, it's a valid point, but it also can't be a free-for-all. So we can't just let people take the store across the mall and make that the seating area for the Ugly Mug and run the food across the mall all day. It can't be a free-for-all. So there has to be some sensible approach to it. And permit shopping centers. So so the mall in there, I think that's a shopping center, the mini mall. That's a shopping center. But I mean, we have to, it's not a matter of pigeonholing it. It has to exercise some authority over having a kitchen serving food across the Cater Street. I mean, it may or may not be okay. I'm not saying it's not.
If you want to
If it's
apply,
unregulated, then we might as well just
if
put.
you want to apply that
Make it a
use
bizarre.
as it's written, right? It says only one use in one building. Now, how many buildings are condoed where there's 3 or 4 different units in a building with 3 or 4 different uses? You can't just say, well, we're going to apply it one way here and another way here. Look at the Commons, Washington Commons on the other side of Ocean. All those buildings are connected. It's one building with a lot of different units, and every unit has a different use, whether it's restaurant, whether it's takeout food, whether it's retail. So if you're going to apply the one principal use in one building, almost every building that has more than one use is out of compliance.
That's probably
Doesn't make
why-
sense.
That's probably why you're allowed to have the kitchen in a clothing store. But now you're gonna start connecting the Ugly Mug.
Well, that's a whole different issue.
Across the street, across the Cater, and we can't just say, well, that's fine. It's,
But that's only being
it's not
used,
latency in there,
let me
too,
finish,
right?
that argument's only being used to classify this takeout kitchen as a restaurant and trying to take a position possibly that there's 2 uses. That's not the case. Because if there's 2 uses, if you say a takeout, or a restaurant and a clothing store is allowed in one building, right? Bringing food across the street has nothing to do with that. That's not what the issue is. Now, that's a site plan issue. If you say, listen, we don't like food being brought across the street, we think it's a safety issue, even though the police says it's not, then it's a different issue. But don't tie that into this not being a permitted use, because it is. It makes sense, and it's consistent with the zoning ordinance.
Tony, I hope you're not arguing for the existence of chaos everywhere to encourage us to add to that chaos.
Well, if I'm arguing for the existence of chaos, it's only because maybe there is chaos everywhere. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that all throughout Cape May, there are more than one business in buildings. There are several businesses in single buildings. And the zoning ordinance has one principal use in one building. It doesn't say you can have more than one principal use in a building, one principal use in one building. So how do you reconcile that with what we're doing? So,
You know,
The short answer is, I don't know how Stewart's, that was a single restaurant, became a clothing store with a kitchen in it. I personally don't understand that, so, you know, I'm as lost as you are.
Tony, your business plan of September 29th actually has forced this discussion to a certain degree because there are certain elements added to your proposal which were taken out of previous proposals. One being the notion of a satellite kitchen, another being a notion of Grubhub drive-up delivery services. And I think we're back to where we were back in September, where is it going to be a takeout business, or is it going to be a satellite kitchen for the Ugly Mug? The discussion tonight sounds like it's a satellite kitchen to the Ugly Mug for 6 tables.
Well,
so can I ask a question? So if it is, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Well,
Why not?
Because it's not expressly permitted as a
You
permitted.
you have 2 uses in one building, is that your position?
I have not taken.
No, I'm just saying, would it be because there's 2 uses in one building?
No, because the Ugly Mug facility is now bleeding across the street into a different site. That's not permitted.
But that's a site plan issue, right?
It's a use issue.
So you're saying,
So-
but
so
let me
if-
just make sure I understand. So you're saying because there's a correlation or delivery of food from the takeout kitchen to the Ugly Mug, follow the logic, that makes the Ugly Mug takeout kitchen a restaurant.
That makes Ugly Mug Takeout a restaurant, yes.
So it's not the food back and forth is just I guess, an analysis of trying to make a position, or at least take a position.
That's a site-
And I'm not saying you're taking.
That's a site plan and safety-related issue.
Right.
It's justifying a use variance. I'm looking at the code because this is a jurisdictional issue before we can go any further. So I'm not taking a position whether we approve this, deny this. I just can't fit it in to these permitted uses. And I think the other thing is, it's a horrible precedent. So all the kitchens within Cape May that are undersized can now expand into these satellite areas
They would need site plan. They would need site plan approval to do that.
and possibly use variances.
And
You know,
it depends.
Depends,
It depends.
exactly.
But I guess I'll go back to my question. Let's get to the fundamental question: is what does the zoning ordinance say? One principal use in one building.
if you were to eliminate well, that's a whole different issue. And I have not touched upon that.
Let me just, if we condoed off the retail kitchen and created 2 separate units now, that's okay. Why not?
Because your support kitchen if you do away with the support kitchen function of that and just do, we're just gonna sell prepared.
Wait a minute, Craig, but that doesn't make sense. Because you're saying by being a support kitchen makes it a restaurant, okay?
It makes it.
Let me finish it.
It makes it a support kitchen, which is nowhere permitted in this ordinance.
It makes it, so you're saying a support kitchen, period, is not permitted, but it's a
It's not listed.
takeout kitchen that also delivers food to other restaurants. Where is that not permitted in the code?
It's not expressly permitted, it's not permitted. If it's not expressly permitted in the.
Retail sale of food is permitted.
Correct. If you were just doing that and not.
What about all the pizza delivery places in town that deliver pizza all over, including maybe to some bars and restaurants? Is that permitted?
Are they a support kitchen specifically for that?
This is not specifically for the Ugly Mug.
The support portion of it is.
Yeah, but it's also for takeout food
Yeah.
as a separate
That's why I'm
business.
trying to separate those two for you. I mean, I'm trying to buy into the fiction that because they are in the same subsection, you can have them both in the same building. I'm not sure I agree with that, okay, but I'm trying to buy into that fiction. And I'm accepting for a fact that the fact that shoe repair and travel agency are in the same subsection, you can put them both in the same building, and it's all one use. So I'm going to adopt that fiction for a second, say retail sale of goods or prepared food. I'm going to ignore the word "or," which makes it sound like it can be one or the other, and say you can have retail sale of goods, which is the nice clothing store, and prepared food in the same building. I'm going to adopt that fiction for a second. What I'm trying to understand is, if we're trying to, if your argument is that this kitchen that has waitresses running back and forth to tables 20 feet away across the street are selling prepared food. And is the answer to that you want them to say that, well, that's selling prepared food. Okay, and then there's a retail sale of goods and prepared food in the same building, they're both in subsection M, that's okay. But if what you're I'm trying to get piece by piece, so to me, I think I have to decide, I don't decide, they have to decide if prepared food, if serving this stuff at tables across the street is the selling of prepared food. Then they say, yes. That sounds like a couple of people don't think so, but I'm trying to.
Is there a separate tax return for this building, and as compared to the Ugly Mug, or is it all one tax return?
It's all the same.
I mean, listen, that's an accounting issue. We can make it 2, we can make it 3.
Well,
You know, it
How about a
doesn't,
mercantile license?
it's 2 separate mercantile
Well,
licenses.
that's different. I
There
understand.
are 2 separate
I
mercantile
understand the
licenses.
mercantile part of it, but you mentioned that all the computers are connected, and,
It's easy to separate in two
well, I'm just
separate
saying,
documents.
I would,
But from a zoning standpoint, that really doesn't, I don't know that if that's a distinction that makes a difference from a zoning standpoint. You know, there are businesses that have 3 different locations, or many locations that file 1 tax return, so.
Let me ask another question. I'm sitting at the table, right? I get your menu. Is everything on that menu available to me at that table?
Yes,
Is everything in that menu available at the takeout place?
yes,
So everything you serve inside the restaurant is going to also be made at the takeout kitchen?
correct.
Really?
Yes,
Soups and everything, all that?
everything. It's all the same.
It sounds like a satellite kitchen.
Well, a satellite kitchen, I looked into it, is designed, not having a satellite kitchen, is if you would take the Ugly Mug and remove the kitchen and increase the seating, and then serve with the kitchen across the street. So you're increasing seating. The Ugly Mug has a kitchen. Like some of you say, it's a helper kitchen. It's not satellite. Satellite's a different animal. Satellite's an empty building that you go to increase your seating and have a building across the street exclusively serving all your food in that building. So there's a distinction between satellite, because satellite is used to increase seating and have a building, a warehouse, a city hall, or an auditorium where you can put tons of tables in and have somebody a block down the street serving into here. That's a satellite. We're not a satellite kitchen. This is, correct, as Craig said, a helper kitchen. It helps also along with takeout. It does help those tables, but it's not the definition of a satellite kitchen, which is specific.
Aside from this beach example, which the beach is an extraordinary thing, it's an outdoor area, it's not owned by anybody really. Is there another example where there's a restaurant that has a kitchen that that then serves food in another building, like across a street? I can't think of one. I mean, like, I'm trying to think of you're trying to make a comparison, and I'm struggling this thing about, like, across the street. Like, I know that the Akamia bleeds into the bakery and all that. Like, I get that there's hodgepodges of little buildings that are semi-connected, the Mexican thing near the red building, whatever that's called, Carpenter's Mall or whatever, that's a hodgepodge. But I'm trying to picture, like, where there's a restaurant serving, where is there something similar to this that we can say?
I think George's does it.
George's?
I think there's a restaurant right on Beach Drive that you order food there, and some of it's prepared at one of the other George's places and
The
brought over.
Where's that?
Yeah, Aquateria is.
Louisa's,
Cafeteria.
they have
Louisa's.
an outdoor dining where, to be honest with you, probably about as close as the Ugly Mug would have to walk across on the same side of the street. But that certainly is serving to outdoor dining outside.
It's on the same property.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, well, yeah,
So
that's-
I'd-
that's what-
I'd like to ask a hypothetical
I'm just saying they
question
have to
for
market
the planning board folks,
Go ahead. Yeah, Mike's got the floor.
if I could.
Thank you.
What would happen if the Ugly Mug, well, the satellite kitchen, whatever you want to call it, would sell the food to the Ugly Mug? And then
Let them expedite it from there.
they would
Correct. That's
do
just easy.
with it what they want. I mean, my question is does that change what we're talking about here?
Right.
So you basically just did a takeout order,
Correct.
and the takeout buyer is the Ugly Mug.
That's right.
Why is it any different, I guess I'm asking, from an individual buying from the takeout place and sitting at the Ugly Mug?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but just a question.
I thought there were
Think
waitresses
about it.
going back and forth. That's, nah.
It's a runner. It's not waitresses going
Yeah,
back
right.
and forth. Waitresses stay on the Ugly Mugs property. You have one runner that,
And can
You just
I mean,
deliver
we're
it.
talking about
You deliver the
six,
food.
we're talking about 6 tables.
6 4 tops.
Maximum.
Maximum.
Because I'd have to imagine that some of those tables, the ticket's going to go to your regular kitchen.
Correct.
And I
This
mean,
is at
I'm just,
peak times. It helps.
because we've talked a lot about serving those 6 tables. Each person is staying at the table for an hour and 15 minutes, or
Yep.
I'm sure you have an average.
Yep.
How many plates are really crossing the street to serve 3 to 4 tables? Because again, I'd have to imagine some of your tables,
Are not.
just like the rest of the tables in the restaurant, are being served by your standard kitchen. If there's a concern about the amount of traffic, I just don't see it from your example. If your application was, we want a new kitchen to serve 20 new tables because we think we can fit them on the other side of the street where Stewart's was located. I think that would be a non-starter for me personally, just because you're adding so much density. But again, I go back to the fact that those folks are sitting at those tables tonight, could
Right.
be,
Yeah.
and they're either getting their food in 20 minutes because there's a little backup, or 20 minutes is probably fast, but
You better be wearing sweaters.
yeah. Or they're getting it in 10 minutes because they had more opening in the kitchen across. Just, you ask for flexibility a little bit in this, and I do think if you look at this very strictly, you might have some problems with it. But I do think they're coming to the planning board for us to look at this to see, does this benefit the city in some way? And that may not be the standard, but I'm looking at this and thinking, I mean, you're taking less density because Stewart's had tables, right? I mean, we had.
92.
Sorry?
92 seats.
92 seats, which obviously causes a parking issue much more than takeout. So I'm just struggling with the big problem, to be honest with you. I think it's, from a planning board's perspective, all of us know that we've lost takeout in town. We've lost the Chinese restaurant and things like that. We're basically down to pizza, which is, we have some great pizza delivery services in Cape May. But it would be nice to have a little bit more variety, and to me, of all the uses that could be in that area, if this was not the C1, I don't think we'd have a conversation. But the examples that you cited, Dellis, and all of the, I think a lot of them are the corner locations within the mall, to me, do have multiple uses, whether it be a coffee counter where you can get breakfast sandwiches, or, so anyway, you cited those sources, and to me, I think if this was an example that would set a bad precedent, that would be another reason to say this can't happen. Where else is this going to occur in town when you look at it? I mean, all of them would have to make an application, and we'd have to obviously judge each one of those applications on the merits of the application. So anyway, I'm just not seeing the issue as much as maybe some others are, and I'm just throwing my opinion out there.
Thank you. I think Mr. Bogle wants to say a few words if
I'm gonna swear him in.
Okay.
Sir, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Mr. King, you asked what happened to Stewart's. It's not easy on the Washington Street Mall. They went out of business. And Stewart's is a big name.
Mayor, you asked Mr. Crowley, what difference does it make? And that's a great question. Mike and Karen are great business people, not just because they know how to run a business, but because they contribute to the community. Look at all of the things going on in Cape May, all the arts, and their names are always on the people that donate. They're really good people. If you know me, I'm a pretty harsh judge of who's a good person, and they're both good persons. The building itself, it was a bank. You know why it stopped being a bank? It failed. It was a bookstore. You know why it stopped being a bookstore? It failed. It was a Stuart Root Beer. Why did it stop? It failed. We need to maximize the use of these buildings. And the final judgment here should be that Mike and Karen have been doing this for 4 years. This isn't something new. I mean, it's coming before you now, but it's been going on and no one got hurt. I worked on the Washington Street Mall for almost 50 years. There are more 5-year-olds walking across Decatur Street in an hour than a runner for an entire year. There's no safety issue. The issue is, are we helping and benefiting the people that come to Cape May on vacation? That's the question.
Let
And
me
the
ask
answer-
what it's doing for the citizens that live here year-round.
The citizens that live here year-round are getting tax revenue off of his sales and Karen's sales. They're benefiting. It's bringing people to the city of Cape May because they're happy to be able to go to a place like the Ugly Mug, take their children, and not have to sit there for 3 hours waiting to get a table. It's definitely benefiting the people of the city of Cape May. It's putting money in the parking meters, especially in May and October, when there's not many people here. The Mug and Sunflowers are destination retail, well, destination restaurant. People come to Cape May because of the Ugly Mug. They come to Cape May because of the Lobster House. They come to Cape May because of lots of these restaurants. They come to Cape May because of the Chalfont and the Congress Hall. These businesses are benefiting the people of Cape May. Listen, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I know I benefit. I benefit from all of the businesses, the taxes, the sales tax and the liquor tax that the people collect in all of the businesses in Cape May. It goes to Trenton and it comes back. All this work that's being done on the roads and so forth right now, that's coming from tax dollars that people spent in the city of Cape May. It may not be direct, but it comes back. So everybody benefits. But I think the people that benefit the most are the people that come here to visit. I can think of grandparents who their family comes, and they have 3 grandkids, and the husband and wife come, and the grandmother's had it up to here with these kids, and she says, take them to the Ugly Mug. Pops and I will stay home. That is basically a benefit. But all of the service industries, and that's what they are, service industries, benefit the people of Cape May and benefit the people who visit Cape May. And I'm going to go full circle. These 2 people are wonderful business people. And I think on that merit, they're not asking you for a whole lot here. They're asking you for something that's been going on for 4 years. They're just asking you to stamp your approval. Nothing bad has happened. No one has got hurt. It's not setting a precedence. Anybody that wants to do something like this has to come before you. You have a right to say yes or no, vote yes or no. In this instance, because it's good people doing the right thing, and because we've discovered over a 4-year period a track record that it's safe, I think that you should consider approving this. I think that, you know, Dennis, you asked questions, but I kept thinking to myself, what difference does it make? They're doing it, and it's successful, and And they're very careful. I know Mike, he's very, very cautious. My God, he's so cautious. He cut the music. He used to have music, and some of the neighbors said it's too loud after 10 o'clock. He cut it. He listens to people. He does what people ask him to do. So, listen, I don't know if my endorsement means a thing, but I'm endorsing this because I think that they're very good people. It's been going on. It's not grandfathered in, obviously, but it kind of is because it's been successful. People want takeout food, and the city of Cape May benefits, and the people, the most important thing is not just the citizens of Cape May, but the people who come to visit our city, who we rely on to buy beach tags and stuff, our parking meters, they like it. And that's very important to those of us who live here. I live here. I've lived here since I was 6 years old. Believe me, everybody benefits. Enough said.
Thank you, Joe.
May I add one thing briefly?
Yeah, Mr.
I just one, first, everything, I couldn't agree more with everything that Mr. Bogle just said. And some of those items that he had touched on, I think, are reflected also in a section of the zoning ordinance that has been ignored throughout this entire process. And that's the intent of the commercial district. And reading directly from it, one of those items provides sufficient space in appropriate locations for the various types of commercial and service establishments anticipated by the comprehensive development plan. B, assure light and air to the extent possible by controlling the spacing and height of buildings and other structures. E, and this is just an excerpt of E, is conserve the value of land and buildings and promote municipal tax revenue. If this project doesn't really check all of those boxes, I'd ask how so. As Mr. Bogle expressed, the tax revenue aspect of it, I won't belabor that point, but to conserve the value of land and buildings, we're finding a very small portion of an existing historic structure that is actually already outfitted for the use that we're proposing. And we're just trying to use it to serve the community. Certainly it's a commercial enterprise and a business, but it is conserving space that already exists, whereas there is potential if the applicant or really the owner of the building decided to expand that building, they could. Right now, it's technically 100% covered due to paving sidewalks on the rear side of that property, but if the building owner decided to, surely there would be an HPC application, but they could expand that building. Sure. But there's room to expand that building, and that's not the intent here. The intent is to conserve the building space and land space, which is also a benefit to the community without building outward.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something? So, listening here tonight, one of the missions of a planning board is to enhance the business environment, in this case, Cape May, if it's proper. I think this is proper. My only consideration here is are we changing an ordinance, or are we trying to interpret an ordinance the way we want to interpret it to agree to pass this?
So that's
my only concern.
I wanted to try and pull us all back, because a lot of this discussion revolves around whether we're approving this or denying this. And we don't even know if we have jurisdiction yet. And the jurisdictional part is, and it's part of what you read, one of the intent of the commercial district provides sufficient space in appropriate locations for the various types of commercial and service establishments anticipated by the comprehensive development plan. The comprehensive development plan is our master plan and our zoning code. And now, the question that we have to answer here, it's not a denial, it's not an approval, it's whether the board has jurisdiction and finds that this proposed use, as described by the applicant, meets one of the use regulations, a use by right as described by section 525.22. And I think you guys all have that. So does that use, is it a permitted use? Did the master plan contemplate this use in this zone? That's the question that needs to be answered. If you vote yes, then you retain jurisdiction, and then you can, we can start talking about approval, whether this, the merits of it, whether there's any safety issues with crossing Decatur Street. Those things happen after, but I think we pull back and figure out, do we have jurisdiction? Is it permitted?
And to follow up along with that, then any reasonable conditions associated with that the board may have can be imposed as a condition of approval. But Craig's right, the first threshold issue is this a permitted use? And we had a long, this is more like a roundtable discussion than it is a hearing, but we do appreciate all the back and forth, so that's kind of the fundamental.
I just wanted to add a great benefit for the city, which the mayor is aware of. The Ugly Mug historically relied on nightlife till 3 a.m. in the morning to pay our bills. That's is the type of establishment it is, besides lunch and dinner. Due to this takeout and due to the increased turnover that this allows us to have, we close at 1 o'clock. We can stay open till 3. For us, it's difficult. Late night is a very difficult business. There's fights. It's not good some nights for the community, for the police, et cetera. We close all summer long at 1 o'clock to 1:30 versus 3 o'clock in the morning, lights up. And, the police will tell you that, the chief of police, everybody, they all are aware of it. So it's a great benefit to rely on increased turnover of food, which happens during the daylight hours, lunch and dinner, versus having to rely on nightlife to pay your bills, which is, I believe, a great benefit for the city. Going into the wee hours at 3 a.m. is not pretty sometimes for the city, and pulling back into a more food establishment is just a much calmer environment.
Could I ask that we hear from our attorney on this?
Yes.
The request is that we want to hear something from you, Rich.
Me? Sure. Craig, which part of our ordinance is the part that requires only one principal use on a lot or building? Is the definition of principal use?
No, it's 525, I think 7. It's really right up front. I'm sorry, 525-9. Required open space used once, single principal structure or use.
Thank you. I wanted to read from it.
Would you like me to read that into the record?
Sure.
No part of a yard or other open space required about any building, structure, or use for the purpose of complying with the provisions of this chapter may be included as part of a yard or other open space similarly required for another building, structure, or use. Each site shall have only one principal building, structure, or use.
All right, so I'll give you the law as best I can. The first thing we have to decide, and, with all due respect to Mr. Bogle, who spoke very eloquently, and the mug, which is absolutely awesome, and I want you to go back and check the videotape of me in there. This has nothing to do with the quality of the business or the people involved. And the first thing you're deciding is nothing to do with the merits of the application, right? In terms of whether it should be granted or not granted. A planning board deals with permitted uses. If the use isn't permitted, then it's the zoning board, which is a quasi-judicial board that has a whole different purpose and scope. So this board deals with with permitted uses, and then, in this context, deals with the site issues, okay? But it first has to be a permitted use. Our ordinance requires one principal use. Each site shall have only one principal building, structure, or use. The site that we're looking at is, I call it the Stewart's Building, only because that's what it was when it was all one thing. Now it's this really great clothing store and a kitchen in the back. What we are trying to figure out is if they can have a clothing store and whatever this kitchen thing is going to be, okay? Even though they're only allowed to have one principal use on a site. So then we go to this other section, 525. in the C1 district, which I have to start over again on my own.
52522.
52522. I'm working off the computer. You have the fancy binder. I don't have that.
My internet gets spotty in here, that's why I bring the paper copy.
52522. Oh, I see. Still have my search. I have it. It's once I get this thing going, I'm all set. Oh, this is the thing I had handed out to everyone. Okay. And that has use regulations for a C1 primary business district. In any C1 district, land, buildings, or premises may be used by right for the following purposes. And then there's the list, all the subsections. You've all had this for the week. Mr. Monzo has worked very hard to convince me that as long as they're both in the same subsection, it should be considered one use. You know, all right. And M says retail sale of goods or prepared food. You heard my questions of Mr. Farnan about that, but retail sale of goods or prepared food. What you're being asked to decide is whether the business plan they described to you is, when combined with the retail store in the front, is a single use under subsection M of a retail sale of goods or prepared food. And if you think that that is what they're doing is a permitted use, then you interpret the ordinance to say it's a permitted use. If it's permitted use, then they don't have to go to the zoning board, because we can deal with permitted uses. Okay? If you feel that that's not a permitted use, what they're proposing under ordinance, then you will vote that you don't believe it's a permitted use, and that doesn't mean they won't get to do what they want to do. It means they have to go to the zoning board, explain what this use is, and that it doesn't seem to be one that's permitted under the uses, and then the zoning board can grant the variance for many of the reasons that Mr. Bogle and others, Mr. Farnan, in terms of purposes of the zone, they may grant the variance. The first thing you need to decide is whether this is a permitted use. Now, Mr. Monzo and his clients have made what I consider to be a persuasive argument, whether it's the one you choose or not. The mall and the C1 district is a hodgepodge of uses, okay? So what they're saying is, yeah, maybe if this were in a different location or zone, this would be maybe something that's not a permitted use. But here it is a permitted use, because it's really just the same mishmash that's everywhere else, and they're really just running food, and since it's permitted use, they should be able to run that food over to tables or to the other restaurant, because restaurants are permitted. This is something like a restaurant or a prepared food, which is permitted in the C1, so why does this need a variance? So they want you to interpret it that it doesn't need a variance, and that it is a permitted use. So you've heard the arguments, and I'm not a decider, okay? So unless I stated the case as fairly as I could, I don't know, I want to be fair to everybody, because the mall is a mess, and there is bakeries and restaurants and cheese shops selling goods. Yeah, like I know there's a lot going on there, so you guys have to make the decision. So your first decision, I think, is to decide whether this is a permitted use.
Mike, I just have a question for Rich. A restaurant or bar that sells clothing with their top name on it, do they need a use variance?
Perhaps not. I understand that.
Same building?
They're selling T-shirts. Yeah, I know. They do that, and a lot of people do that. And,
Because if we're talking by the way of that ordinance, it's no different.
yeah. I get it. And I guess if someone really called them on it, are they operating a store inside their restaurant? Yeah, and so is every bar in Key West. Like, I own the T-shirts, so I get it. So if a restaurant's selling some T-shirts, I don't know, it seems to be very ancillary, but I identify the issue.
Do we want to hear, Craig, you have any more to add on your report?
I do not for the use issue.
Okay.
I think we've talked enough about the use issue. so-
Do we have to open this up to the public and shut it down for this?
Sure, I think we let the public speak in the middle of it, but that's okay.
Well, whatever you want to do. I mean, to be official, we have to open it up, correct? Or not at this point?
Yeah, I mean, technically, this is an issue of law. I don't know that you get public input, but why not? So go ahead, that's fine.
Anybody from the public want to speak? Seeing none?
Oh, ma'am, you have to step to, you have to do it right. If you're going to talk, it's okay. Yeah, go up to the microphone, state your name and your address, and then I'll swear you in, okay? Say your name and spell
Green
the rest.
button, it's a green
My
button.
name's Karen Thompson, KarenThompson, and my business, I have 3 stores on the mall. Is that what you're asking for my address?
Just give me an address.
2 Farrow Lane?
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The only question I have is there a size of a building under the ordinance? It never talks about like the size of the properties. Because if you have a property that is, I'll say 1,000 square feet, or you have a building very large, like this bank is large, and when Mr. Bogle showed me the opportunity to rent it, I said, I love this. This is great. And I remember looking across the street and thinking, gosh, you know, I really don't need a kitchen right now. Joe, this is correct, right? And I looked across the street and I said, maybe that, I do know, Mike, maybe that place would benefit by it. So the only reason I'm questioning is this building is large. I don't know the exact square footage, but there's a huge basement. There's an upstairs. There's 2 levels. Really, this could be a mall. And I'm lucky to be a tenant in it, and I thank you. So maybe there should be some kind of a thing put in place, verbiage put in place that says the square footage of properties. For having a business on the mall for over 25 years, we have grown tremendously, and people love to come here. Myself as a local, and friends and family and people we don't even know. We make national headlines, and people want to see us. So we do have to have large properties, and we do have to think about what is important over the next 10 or 20 years to start feeding people so they're not grumpy, and that is a ripple effect on a lot of things. So the 3 most important ingredients in any great town: commercial business, I'll say shopping, of course, dining, pleasurable, good, great experiences, and real estate, which are homes. All things that we love, right? And why we all are here, and probably most of us live here. So the only thing I'm adding is that I think the square footage would be important to understand if you have 2 businesses under one roof.
Thank you.
In simple terms, can I just ask, or,
Close this to the public.
fine.
Close to the public now. Go ahead. Now you-
In simple terms, the first vote would be whether we want to approve a kitchen facility in that building.
No.
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 The first vote is whether or not you believe that the use as they've described it is a permitted use under our ordinance, given the various uses that are permitted in the C1 district. If you decide that this use is a use that's permitted in the zone, then this board can deal with the site plan issue. And then you decide if you think it's safe and appropriate and all of that. If you think that it is not a permitted use, that it doesn't fall within the uses permitted, as I described your ordinance, then you're going to say that that you believe it needs a use variance, and that's not something that we do. They have to go to the zoning board and make the arguments and try to get approval.
So there wouldn't be a second vote to approve their business plan of this running back and forth?
Use variance, we don't have jurisdiction to hear it.
Okay.
So in really, really simple terms, we have to decide what does the "or" mean in that code? Does it mean it could be one or has to be one or the other, or could it be one of each kind?
Right, and whether the kind that they're proposing is prepared food.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Anybody else have anything you want to say? So how do you want to read the yes or no? How do you want to read it?
Well, I think I would keep it simple and say the question before you is whether this needs a variance, If it needs a variance and you vote yes, that means that you don't have jurisdiction. So you decide if it needs a variance. If it needs a variance, we don't have jurisdiction. So you're gonna, if you vote yes, it means that the application is over. They have to go to the zoning board. If you, well,
That's not simple.
that's simple.
Is
There's
it
no
a
simple way to do
permitted
it.
use or not?
May I,
Okay, is it permitted use?
Is
may,
it permitted use?
may I
If
offer
it's
this?
permitted use, if you vote yes, then that means you're going to hear it further. Thank you, that's a good correction, okay? Is this a permitted use? If you say yes, then you're going to be able to hear the whole application. If you say no, then that means they have to go to the zoning board, okay? So yes means you hear it and that it's a permitted use. No means you don't, it has to go to the zoning board.
For the record, can you restate the zoning ordinance permitted use for the board and for the applicant?
We'll do that.
Retail sale of goods or prepared food, is that the line
I'm
you're
going to
talking?
start, I'm going to do the whole thing.
Item M.
If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it the same way I did, because that's how you get in trouble. You do it one way, and then you change it. We started off by reading principal use. You're allowed to have one principal, each site shall have only one principal building, structure, or use. We then went to the C1 Business District, 525-22. That says that uses by right. In any C1 district, land, buildings, or premises may be used by right for the following purposes. Then it lists a bunch of purposes. The one that we're focusing on is M, retail sale of goods or prepared food. And the question is, considering that provision, C1 uses as a whole, considering the section regarding one principal use, and considering the business plan as they've described it, whether you believe this is a permitted use, given what they proposed, or whether you think that it requires a use variance. If you vote yes, it means that you think that it is a permitted use, and you're going to hear it. If you vote no, it means you think that it is not a permitted use, and that they have to go to the zoning board to get permission to do what it is they propose. Does everybody understand that? What would you like me to do different?
No, I would just also like to add the definition of use also in the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Do you have that in front of you?
I do. Would you like me to read it?
I'd rather me read it, but I don't want to make everybody wait, so, oh, here we go, I got it, hold on.
Can you tell me where that is so I know?
Definitions, 525-4,
Thank you.
2, sorry, 3.
I will look at use, but I think principal use is the more specific definition to consider. But I
9
will
was
look at use.
each site.
5. 4, sorry.
Could we take a break? Could we take like a 2-minute break?
All right, can I just read this definition, so I have to go back to it? The specific use, the specific purpose for which land or a building or structure is designed, arranged, intended, or for which it is or may be occupied or maintained. The term, quote, permitted use, close quote, or its equivalent shall not be deemed to include any nonconforming use. I read that. Okay. All right.
So we're taking 2 minutes before we vote? Is that what we're doing?
Okay, it's 8:18. We'll take a break,
We'll wait for
quick
Gary
break.
to reappear.
Everybody thoroughly confused?
Yes.
Can we turn off the mics, please? Microphones off, please?
Everybody turn your mics back on, please. All right, so the yes vote is, again, that we continue, correct?
The yes vote is that it's a permitted use, and you can hear the rest of the application and decide on tomorrow.
Karen, roll call, please.
Yes. Can we get a motion? Do we have a motion?
Good to have.
I'll make a motion.
Rick is going to make Mr. Lundholm motions. Who seconds?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Producer seconds. Mayor Mullick?
And I'm sorry to ask, just coming back, the motion is exactly, again, could you say that it is a permitted use?
Yes is that it's a permitted use, and you'll hear the rest of the application. If it's no, that it's not a permitted use, then you don't have jurisdiction, and you won't hear the rest of the application. But you're entitled to speak to your reasons as you vote. So.
I'm going to speak to my reasons then. I'm going to say yes for one major reason right from the beginning. We have had this applicant here for, I think, probably a combined about 5 hours from the last application to this one. So I think we should hear it. I mean, we've kind of put them through a lot to then say, okay, you got to go to the zoning board. That's a lot of time to have a lot of argument to get to that point. That's not my number one point. But I will say to any other district other than C1, my answer would be no. I think it's certainly it does not fit any other district, but I do think in the C1 district it does. Some of the examples that they provided along the mall, I don't think you can make a strong argument that there aren't already several locations that have what you could argue to be several different businesses within one location. So whether that's right or not, it is what exists, and I think we've gotten along. You have a history of doing this already. It's already occurring. I've heard no problems with it personally. As the mayor, I usually get those complaints, so I would know about it. So I can just tell you that I'm okay with it, and I vote yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
I'm voting yes, because I am on the side of, I think it is a permitted use. Just from my reading of the retail sale of goods or prepared foods, I think you have the option to do both, but I also think that it fits in the C1 district, and it makes sense, and I think it is for everybody's benefit. I don't think anybody loses here.
Mrs. Reed?
I'm going to vote yes on the premise of it being prepared food for takeout.
Mr. Crowley?
Yeah, I vote yes. I find it consistent with Section M, which deals with retail sale of goods or prepared foods. So I vote yes.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Paducis?
Yes with a statement. Voting yes because of the integrity of Mr. Bogle and Mr. Slavic as a business owner. I only want to say that please watch for the safety of your runners as they cross Decatur Street. That is a pretty congested area. And good luck. I think it's going to be successful. I know it's successful, so I'm definitely voting yes on this.
Mr. Jones?
Yes, many of the same reasons that were already stated. I vote yes.
Thank you.
Okay, you've determined that it is a permitted use, and therefore you have jurisdiction to consider the merits. I think you've heard the testimony on the merits, so I don't know that there's any further testimony. I think you can just vote now on whether you approve the site plan unless someone has any specific site plan questions or any conditions you want to put on it. Now would be the time, and then we'll make a motion and vote.
I'd just like to note one thing.
Sure.
And we talked about this, I think, at the previous meeting. Because this is a permitted use and because they're reducing the parking requirements for the site, there's no parking variance required.
Thank you.
So this is a no variance application, site plan application, but given the site concerns, does anybody have any conditions or anything else we're going to add to the motion, or is this a motion, we just make a motion for preliminary and final site plan approval?
There was a couple of conditions on page 2 and 3 of 6. These are all things that the applicant agreed to. The sign, providing the sign information. I think there was some just solid waste and recycling issue that we noted on a plan. And we did support the waiver from the other site plan requirements, so did support that.
Okay, so subject to the conditions and waivers outlined in the engineer's report, do you have any concerns about those, Mr. Monzo?
No.
Subject to the waivers and conditions outlined in the engineer's report, the motion would be made to grant preliminary and final site plan approval.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Yeager, seconded by Mr. Lundholm. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Mullick?
Again, because that this is a less dense use in the C1 district, I vote yes.
Councilmember Yeager?
Yes, and thanks for all the hard work and patience you put into this. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mrs. Reed?
I'm going to vote no because I'm against the servers going across the street. I'm against the Grubhub not having a designated area for pickup. I do live in this town, and I want it to be fair to everybody. I think the business owners should win, but I think the citizens who put up with the chaos all the time need to be considered. And having lived here, that is a very chaotic area in town, and by allowing you to do that type of business, and then I noticed something in the wording, you're going to do catering from there, it just is adding to the chaos for everybody, not only the residents, but the tourists. So I would have had no problem if you did prepared food strictly for takeout, not involving the location across the street.
Mr. Crowley?
I share the same sentiments as Mrs. Reed. Is there any way, Mr. Chairman or Attorney, that we could sunset this in a way that would give the city the opportunity to make sure that the operation doesn't create the kinds of problems that some of us are concerned
There's a
with?
motion on the table. I don't think we consider it now. Maybe, when you,
I would see how this motion goes. Sometimes we allow a second motion with different parameters, just give the applicant a second bite at the apple, but let's see how this first one goes, okay? There's a motion pending, so we can't really change it.
Again, I'm concerned with this. I would have to vote no, just because I understand the value of this proposal, and I understand that there's good hearts all around. I just want to make sure that we don't do something to that place in town that makes it even more chaotic and congested and confusing than it already is.
Mr. Lundholm?
Yes.
Mr. Paducis?
Yes, and I'm voting yes only because the police department did approve this in March of this year, that it would not be a problem. And again, I'm going by the integrity of the owner here, that he will watch that area and keep it safe for not only your patrons, but all pedestrians and traffic.
Mr. Jones?
voting yes. Any more comments from, just we're done here?
That was
5-2.
4-2.
5-2 in favor.
We've got 5-2.
5-2.
5-2.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any further business for the board?
Thank you for filling in, Mr. Jones.
Motion?
Second it.
All in favor?
Second.
Good night, everyone.
You know, the only problem. Aye. Aye.